So I've had a PS5 DualSense Edge for around a little over a year now at this point, and today I wanted to make a video explaining some things that I like about this controller and some things that I heavily dislike about this controller, and I also want to answer the question, is the PS5 DualSense Edge worth it? So in this video, I'm going to be doing exactly that. It's your boy BrennerMan15. If you guys like the video, hit the like button. If you guys want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button. Let's go ahead and just get straight into it. So this is the PS5 DualSense Edge. It is the Pro controller officially from Sony, or it is Sony's official Pro controller, right? So this thing it has its removable joysticks, you know, if you have stick drift, just slot these in, you know, get the replacement, just slot it in, don't have to buy a whole new controller, which I will get into that later. I wanted to go ahead and talk about some things, but first I wanted to talk about an issue that I had with this controller, not with this controller specifically, but with the DualSense Edge. Now, this isn't my first DualSense Edge. This is actually my second controller, and this controller specifically I haven't owned for over a year. It's been about 7 months. So effectively what happened with the first controller is I was playing some Lego Jurassic World, as one might would, one random day. And I was playing, you know, just playing, and I accidentally, I went to get up to use the restroom or to do something, and I accidentally bumped my controller. I had a Xbox One S up here at one point because I used it for some YouTube videos, so it's just chilling on my desk. I accidentally, when I got up out of my chair, I accidentally pushed it forward, and I'm going to recreate how strong I hit the console. That's about as hard as I hit it. I maybe hit it a little bit harder, but I don't want to mess up my monitor, obviously. So it was kind of like that. Just a gentle bump, okay? It completely bricked the controller. Like, the controller, after that, I got up, went to go grab something, came to use the controller. It would not turn on at all. I had to go through a pretty lengthy process of trial and error trying to fix it. And ultimately, I ended up just getting the controller warrantied. And I had to send it to Sony. I was talking with a Sony customer service dude, and basically, you know, we tried a few things to try and get the controller to work. After it didn't work, he basically told me, hey, you know, we're gonna give you a shipping label, just ship the controller in, only ship the controller in, and not the case, and we will just send you a new one. So this is the second DualSense Edge that I've gotten, and I've gotta say, I'm pretty disappointed in this controller. So let's go ahead and start with the bad about this controller. You know, minus the whole bricking thing, that could have been a quality control issue, could have been a one-time thing. This controller obviously still works for me. All I know is there are other bad things about this controller, okay? So if you notice, the PS5 DualSense Edge has these rubberized grips right here, which honestly feel really nice, and I feel that this is a really good feature for the controller. However, as you can see, this side is completely gone. There is no grip except for this little piece right here. And for this side, you can see that it is wearing away from the edge. Now, these little rubberized grips connect by these tiny little tabs. It's kind of hard to see if the camera will focus. But basically, they go into the plastic right there, and they kind of just stick inside there. They're not very strong. All right, the first controller I had didn't have this issue, so I don't know if this is a quality control issue, but on this controller specifically, the left side started to go before the right side, and they basically just started kind of ripping out. Now, I didn't tear it off, or I did tear this side off. It had come out to about like halfway, so it was like around there, and so I figured I might as well just pull it all off because I don't want this, you know, flappy thing when I'm trying to play, you know, it's all getting in the way and stuff, you know, distracting me from gaming, right? So I ended up ripping this side off, but I've kept this side intact, and as you can see, it is almost halfway off of the controller. And to be honest, I feel like they could have done a better job securing these. So this is about 7 months of wear and tear. As you can see, you know, this isn't white anymore. It gets stained pretty easily, but that's just because it's like a rubber-ish, you know, it traps dirt and stuff pretty easily. That's not what that's not my complaint. My complaint is that these are not secured well enough into the controller. And I feel like they wear off way too easily. So that's one of the issues I've had with this controller. Another issue with this controller is this thing's battery life is abysmal. Now, later in the video, I'm going to do a test on the battery life. I want to test to see how long the controller lasts from a full charge to 0 to give you guys an accurate number, and I will put it on the screen right now. But the battery life on this controller is actually terrible. You get more battery life out of Series X and S controller running freaking AA batteries. So these batteries have lasted longer than, you know, a single charge of this controller. And this is a problem because I don't like having my controller plugged in. I like not having a cable attached to it apart from the, the headset. Thankfully, they do give you a very, very, very long USB-C cable. It's like, I think it's like 10 feet and it's super long. But if we actually look at the USB-C cable here, you can see that there's kind of an issue. So the cable they give you is this nice braided cable. It feels good, feels high quality, but as you can see, the end of this is wrapped in electrical tape for a reason, and that is because the fabric on this, as it wears, it started to rip and tear, and it tweaked the cable because there was one thread that was connected, and so it kept tearing, it kept wanting to stretch, but that one thread kept it from flexing, and so it permanently tweaked it like this. Now I could bend it back, but the result of that, of trying to bend it back and forth, the wires will eventually snap. So my solution was to cut that thread and just put on some electrical tape, and it's kind of working, but I have a feeling that this cord probably won't last much longer. Now, this is the original cable, so this cable is over a year old. So this is from the first controller. Everything that I have here in front of me, including the case and these joystick caps, these are all from the original controller. The only thing that is not original is the controller itself right here. This cable has not lasted, I feel like it hasn't lasted that long, and some of it could be wear and tear from myself, but ultimately good cable, just not the most durable in my opinion. So yeah, another thing I wanted to talk about with this controller is there are some times where I have some really bad latency with this controller via the Bluetooth connection. Now, there is a way to fix this, and this is by simply going into your PS5 settings. If you go over to your controller, the controller settings page, you can change the connection type from Bluetooth to use the charging cable, so it plays directly from the cable, and that will ensure you have the least amount of input latency. But if you're like me and you don't like having your controller plugged in 24/7, you're going to be using the Bluetooth at some point in time. Now, for this controller, you're actually going to have it plugged in most of the time because the battery life is so poor, but you can get around 3 to 4 hours out of this thing without plugging it in. However, there'll be times when I'm playing games like the new Valorant that just released on console. It's not a new game, but it just released on consoles. There'll be times where I'm playing and then there'll be a couple seconds of delay where it will not register my next inputs, and it'll just keep registering this same input. So if I look up like that, but then I look to the right, sometimes it won't register that right look, and it'll just keep my character, the camera will just keep panning up, which I'll provide an example of this if I can capture it. It's kind of rare that it happens, but it will happen eventually. And I don't know if this is an issue with the controller itself, or if it's just the way that Bluetooth works with the PS5, how, their Bluetooth controller or whatever, I don't know if that's an issue specifically with that, but safe to say, I've never had this issue on a normal PS5 Dualsense controller. I've only had this issue on the Pro controller, which, for $200, you're effectively nerfing yourself. So it's a very annoying feature. It has cost me rounds in competitive games. It has cost me games in competitive games. So very annoying feature, is not a fun thing when it happens, and I'm not sure how to fix it other than just plugging the controller in and changing that setting. So that is an issue that I think needs to be addressed, and I haven't really heard much people talk about it, mainly because all of my friends have the normal PS5 DualSense controller, and that controller doesn't seem to have that issue. The last bad thing I want to talk about with this controller is the joystick modules. So I'm going to show you specifically how you can remove these joystick modules yourself. So the DualSense Edge has this little switch on the back, and it's kind of hard to reach. If you have a good fingernail, you can kind of push that to the right, and it releases this little top cover here. So if you set this to the side, you can see your stick modules, and you simply lift the lever all the way up, and you can slide the stick module out. So these things, Sony were, the main marketing of this controller was that it has these replaceable joysticks. That way you don't have to buy a new controller every time you get stick drift. Now, Sony could have done this a completely different way. If they really wanted to get rid of stick drift, they could have just put Hall effect joysticks in their controllers. They didn't do that. These are normal joysticks, just with this, housing that allows them to be slotted in and out of a controller. And the problem with these things, these are 20 bucks a pop. So this right here, this joystick module, this is $20 for this little joystick module. $20 each, not even for a set of two, just $20 each, which, it's kind of expensive, but to be honest, it is still better than buying a new controller. And that's why I bought this controller, because I'm like, well, at the end of the day, it'll take, I'll have the controller for so long that then, the next console will be out, like, I'll be able to replace the joysticks on this thing for much longer than if I were just to use a normal PS5 DualSense controller. So the only problem with this is Sony made very limited quantities of these joysticks, meaning these are effectively sold out everywhere almost all the time, making them extremely difficult to obtain. And Sony did this on purpose, and there is a YouTube video, which if I can find it, I will link it in the description. I'll probably put it in the video as well. That kind of describes the controller scam when it comes to consoles and controllers. But effectively, Sony only made a very limited amount of these so that people would go and buy another controller. If you can't buy the joystick modules and they have a lot of stick drift on them, you're more likely to go and buy a new controller. Now, you can still get these joystick modules. I know there's some companies that make OEM replacement joysticks, but the ones I've seen are double the price of these. So for $40, you can get one of these sticks, and it's not even an official Sony one, it's an off-brand one. So that is obviously a huge issue. Sony marketed this thing heavily with having, this is the solution to stick drift, without, just putting the joysticks that can't get stick drift in them. They give us replaceable joysticks and then only make a very limited quantity. Everyone who buys this controller nowadays is going to be screwed because you don't have replaceable joysticks, you have removable joysticks. I think that's one of the biggest scams that I fell for, was buying this controller, thinking that I would be able to replace these sticks later on when I eventually do get stick drift. These controllers are $200. Okay, this is $200 for this pile of crap, right? A normal DualSense controller is like $70 around there. So yeah, they want you to go out and buy a new controller. That's why they didn't make very many of these. And that's why, effectively, this controller's pretty much a scam. If you want to stop watching here, you don't want to hear the good things about this controller, you can stop watching. This controller is not worth it, in my opinion, simply because one of the main things this controller is marketed for, you can't even do that unless you spend an absurd amount of money, more than you would have normally been able to spend, right? But this controller isn't all bad. There are some good features with this controller. No, this controller isn't all bad. I did make an initial review, and I thought that this controller was decent. I liked it. When I first bought it, I thought it had good features, and when I bought it, the joystick supply issue wasn't an issue. So I thought things were all going to be handy dandy, fandy, wandy, whatever, This thing does come in a carrying case, as you can see. It's a pretty nice case. It's a plastic shell, and it's pretty hard. Yeah, I have never once used this. In fact, I do not use the DualSense Edge case at all. Ideally, the only people who are probably going to use this controller is if they like storing it in the case, and they don't just store it out on my desk like I do, or they travel a lot, or they're just simply traveling. Like if I wanted to bring my PlayStation with me somewhere, then yes, I'd probably put the controller in the case and then take it with me. But other than that, this controller effectively never leaves this desk. So I don't have any use for this case other than the fact that it stores all of the extra crap that you get with the controller. Let me talk about the accessories here for a minute. So you do get some joysticks. These are not the joysticks that come by default. These are the default joysticks, and these are the normal joystick tips you'll find on any DualSense. But one of the key features about this controller is you can swap these off quite easily. So if I wanted one side to be higher than the other, you could have a setup like this. you know, vice versa if you wanted to. I just have both of the extended ones on just because I was a frequent control freak user myself, so I do like having the longer sticks. I think it gives me a little bit better control. Other than the OEM and the extended ones, you also get the normal flat top ones. These are the normal size, the same as the other joysticks. They just have this PS3 flat top. So if you remember on the PS3 and PS2 controllers that had joysticks, they had this kind of rubberized flat, like I guess mushroom top, if you could call it. And I honestly like that better, but they don't really give you a lot of variation in size. It's either these extended ones that, to be honest, aren't much extended. They're not super high. They're kind of like a level 2 control freak, if you know what I mean. And then you just get the normal sizes here. So that's not really a good thing. I feel like we should have a little bit more variety in joystick tips. To my knowledge, I'm pretty sure Sony doesn't sell other variations of this. I will obviously do some research when I'm editing the video. You also get some back paddles, which is always very nice. I like these little wedge paddles because I feel like I strain my fingers too much when I use the normal paddles, so I like the little wedge paddles. They allow me to have a little bit better control, and you know, the two back buttons are definitely a plus. I don't use them all the time, but if I'm playing something like Call of Duty or Apex, you know, it's nice to be able to crouch and stuff without having to move my finger or without having to spam my joystick in. Some other things I do want to talk about the controllers is these trigger stops. I feel like these are very useful. I use these all the time, and it kind of changes the way that I've used triggers on controllers. I almost never have these at normal unless I'm playing like a racing game where I actually need precise control of the trigger input. But for the most part, if I'm playing pretty much any game, I'm always using them at the least amount of travel distance. Now, these have worn out, and as you can see, they do kind of travel a lot. I don't think they traveled as much before, but for 7 months of use, they've held up pretty well, and they still work perfectly fine. Another thing I want to talk about are the actual joysticks themselves. For some reason, I really haven't gotten much stick drift on this controller. I've been using it for around 7 months, and it's lasted longer than any PS4 controller I've ever used. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in and test it, you know, for the video to see if it has any stick drift. But, you know, personally, either all the games that I play just have a really high dead zone, or these sticks really don't have much stick drift, which is a good thing because these last a long time. It's also a good thing because, you know, you can't buy replacement joysticks anymore, at least not for $20. So it's good. It's a good thing that these things last long because I'm not able to replace them anyways. So yeah, other than that, I really don't have much to say about this controller. I think the most used feature for me on this controller are these two buttons right here. These are the function buttons. Now, these allow you to switch your profiles on your PlayStation. So if you have a profile that has like different back button combinations, but you want to play a different game and you have a profile set up for that game, you can use this and you just press one of these buttons and it switches the profile. So that's a cool feature. I don't use it like a lot, but the other main thing with this controller is this allows you to change your party mix audio and your normal audio. So this is a game changer, and I feel like every controller should have this. Instead of me having to press the PlayStation button, navigate over to the audio setting, press X, then switch it in there, I can simply just push this down at any part in the PlayStation. If I'm playing a game, if I'm in the menus, if I'm browsing the store, if I'm in the party, whatever, you simply press this down. Using the left and right, you can adjust your party to game audio mix, and then up and down on the D-pad allows you to change the overall volume. If I go from playing a competitive game, or like if I'm having trouble hearing my friends in the party chat, I can just quickly switch it over to a higher party chat over game audio. Or if I'm playing a competitive game and I need to sound hoard, I can just switch it over to the game side, you know? I feel like that's probably my most used, that's the thing that I use most on this controller, other than the trigger stops. So yeah, I feel like this is a game changer. I feel like every controller should have this because it's just super useful. It allows you to change your audio in a fly. And honestly, that's one of the really good things about this controller. But other than that, this controller has too many flaws. Sony was way too greedy with it. It's just not worth. In my opinion, You can find better third-party controllers that have Hall effect sticks, that have mouse click triggers, you know. Myself personally, I almost never use the adaptive triggers. They're a cool feature, but I almost never use them just because it's pretty annoying. So I almost always have my triggers at the lowest travel. In my opinion, I think mouse click triggers are the next best bet, as you know, most other third-party controllers aren't going to have this feature. They're just going to have a simple mouse click for the trigger. If you can find a aftermarket or a third-party controller that has back buttons, Hall effect sticks, and mouse click triggers, I would say it is easily more worth than this pile of junk. Is it worth to buy this in 2024? No, do not buy this controller. Do not give Sony your money for this lazy excuse for a Pro controller. I would rather buy an Xbox Pro controller than this thing, right? So yeah, that's my thoughts on the controller. It does have some good things going for it. I do like the I do like the trigger stops. I do like the joystick tips, how you can just kind of switch them. That is a cool feature, even though I only use these joystick tips. And this feature right here allows you to change your audio and even in your profiles. I think that's a really good feature. Everything else about this controller honestly just kind of sucks. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to hear me ramble on about more random products, then hit that subscribe button. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to try out some other third-party controllers to see if they're better than this controller. I am interested in trying some other controllers out. I just want to know if you guys would be interested in watching me review those controllers and compare them against this hunk of garbage. Other than that, I'm RunnerMan15. I'll see you guys later. Peace.